If you were trapped on a spaceship in a decaying orbit, with an alien artifact turning everyone into zombies, what would you do? Let's find out as we break down Aliens. Sorry, I mean Dead Space Remake 2023. Want to hear a scary story? Go ahead, kids, gather around the plasma torch. It's all about Isaac Clarke, the #1 guy you call to fix broken stuff in space. He's like an intergalactic TaskRabbit. Isaac is the engineering and ship system specialist on the maintenance ship, the USG Kellyan, which has been sent by the Coordinates Extraction Corporation, or CEC, there are a lot of acronyms in this video, to locate a lost vessel. The independent mining ship, the USG Ishimura. It went dark around Aegis 7, a planet you're forbidden to mine that the miners were, you guessed it, mining. Isaac and his crewmates were supposed to scope out the situation and, if possible, get comms up and running again. There's our boy IC, Kendra Daniels, the computer specialist, Zach Hammond, the chief security officer, and the 2 others whose names you don't need to remember because they're clearly there to be killed immediately in gruesome, awesome ways. But for Isaac, this mission is kinda personal. He's haunted by the last video message that he got from his girlfriend Nicole, who works aboard the Ishimura as the chief medical officer. Things apparently got so bad that they haven't spoken for 6 months. And that's in space months. The crew of the Kellyan find the Ishimura parked near Aegis 7, having mined it illegally, the space equivalent of building your house on Native American burial ground.
Guns are useless, What in God's name is that?
The ship is a planet cracker, and did what planet crackers do, splitting the whole world wide open. The Ishimura itself looks disabled too, and when they hail it, all that comes back is some weird whispering and inhuman growls. Isaac assumes that this means the comms are on the fritz, even though I'm pretty sure there's no way to break a speaker that makes it growl like a zombie. None the wiser, they start the automated docking procedure as Chief Security Dude Hammond gives marching orders. Suddenly, a gravity tether connecting the 2 ships fails, sending the Kellyan completely out of control. Don't worry though, I'm sure that's the only malfunctioning machinery we'll run into up here. The ship crashes through a wall of the Ishimura, slamming into the hangar bay hard enough to break a crewman's ankle, and damage itself so much that it's unable to fly again, leaving you all stranded. Hammond and Isaac go to make contact with the Ishimura crew and get a medic for their injured pal Johnston. Isaac puts on his rig suit, which is like a cross between Mandalorian armor and an old-timey diving suit with glow sticks stuck to the spine. The ship's onboard computer systems scan the ID embedded within the suit and tell Isaac that he can grab the rest of the suit's tools from Chief Engineer Jacob Temple. In fact, no one can pinpoint anyone's location, because the hangar bay and other nearby rooms are all eerily silent and empty of life. Turning on the diagnostic console, Isaac sees that the damage to the Ishimura is extensive, which is an understatement given how much stuff he has to run around fixing in this game. Just then, sirens blare, and the room turns red as the ship declares an emergency quarantine and lowers a partition separating Isaac from the rest of the crew. The good news is that Isaac is safe and sound behind his nice thick partition. The bad news is that he just witnessed most of his friends murdered by weird flesh zombies, parodies of the human form dragging their skin spikes with them as they skewer and bite and kill. He flees through the halls unarmed and dashes into an open elevator. He gets his very first close-up look at a Necromorph, aka a space zombie, when one bursts in through the elevator doors. Thankfully, they are apparently the strongest elevator doors ever made because they slice the guy clean in half. Seriously, I know it's space, but if elevator doors were that strong, we'd be up to our eyeballs in split-in-half office workers. Okay, let's leave Isaac making awkward elevator conversation with a dismembered torso and rewind for just a minute. As the rest of the game will reveal, our man was kind of screwed from the start in a lot of ways. But that doesn't mean that he couldn't have made some smarter survival decisions already. First things first, spaceship safety. The Kellyan is hurtling through the cosmos toward a ghost ship orbiting a forbidden planet. Maybe when it comes time to dock, everyone should sit down and put on their seatbelts. Then you wouldn't get all tossed around like ragdolls in a dryer and break an ankle, forcing the team to split up and devote precious time to hunting down medical help, which puts everyone at greater risk. Speaking of splitting up, maybe don't? At least not so quickly. Hammond and Isaac may not know the ship is overrun with zombies yet, But after seeing the state of the Ishimura, its lack of power and missing crew, it probably would have been a good time to circle back and convoy with the group, especially after the weird transmission that was so obviously not a comms malfunction. One thing Isaac does right is put on some futuristic space armor, which is super smart. In any survival situation, if futuristic space armor is an option, it's a solid one. Which leads us to the real screw-ups of the game, the CEC Mining Consortium itself. First of all, you sent your best ship, the most sophisticated ship in the entire human fleet, according to the intro, to crack a planet in half that's been a no-go zone for literally hundreds of years? Maybe send a smaller ship to scout that thing out, run some tests, use some sensors, scan some things. It's the future after all. No need to jump right to planet cracking. What happened to foreplay? And then when things go sideways, the best rescue you can muster is one engineer and one computer hacker. And 3 security officers? Now is when you send the big ship. You have no idea what things will be like on the Ishimura. That's what makes it an emergency. There's every chance you're going to need oxygen, resources, medical equipment, space for survivors, and the wounded. But no. Instead, you send a loose assortment of people who barely know each other and don't include a doctor. After all, there's already a doctor on board, right? Dr. Nicole Brennan, Chief Medical Officer and Isaac's semi-estranged girlfriend. All we know so far is that she's sorry for something and that Isaac regrets whatever happened between them. But from CEC's point of view, why would you ever send someone with a deep personal stake in the mission on the rescue team? That's all I'm saying. Especially considering that you're currently engaged in shady dealings around Aegis 7. Maybe don't send a guy who has every reason to fight as hard as he can to save your crew and expose your crimes. Also, maybe pack enough of those rig suits for everyone, huh? We find out later that there are tons of escape pods, and there's huge rooms full of mammoth machinery everywhere. So we know you've got the resources. It's futuristic space armor with magical jet boots that can survive in the vacuum of space, and literally heal the wearer using some kind of glowing life juice in the spine. Isaac is about to use it to kill his way through about 14,000 Necromorphs without a scratch, so maybe an extra rig or 2 lying around wouldn't hurt. Since there's only one, our boy Isaac naturally hops right in it and marks it with his scent for no takebacks. Smart. Even though I mentioned it before, I feel like it's important to point out that a bunch of engineers and scientists got together to build a spaceship that holds hundreds of people and can crack a planet open, and decided that the elevator doors should close so hard that they can cut a body in half. Someone tested that and watched the doors crush a bowling ball like a human skull and said, "Looks good to me, guy building a spaceship." While it's true that it happened to work in Isaac's favor this time, there's no question that thing would cause accidents and a hell of a lot of cleanup. After that, things really start to move when Isaac finds a tool called a plasma cutter lying on a workbench under a sign written in blood that says, "Cut off their limbs." Thanks. That's horrifying. The cutter is capable of shooting out little lines of energy that can cut through basically anything, including the tortured flesh of the restless undead, which is great for Isaac. Taking the advice of some bloody graffiti, which always works out well, Isaac battles his way down the corridors, shooting necromorphs who lunge at him or lumber out of the dark. He either fires into their center mass over and over to no effect, or else chops their hideous limbs off to kill them, depending on how quickly you caught on to that mechanic when you played the game. These limbs include big fleshy spikes growing out of their backs. Isaac finally gets a call from his surviving crewmates, Daniels the hacker and Hammond the soldier. In order to reconnect, they have to fix the trams.
I can't lift the lockdown or call the tram until we get a spare from the maintenance bay. But it's all on Isaac's side of a quarantine.
Which means Isaac has to fix the trams. Seriously, no one helps this dude out the whole game. Hoping to run into Nicole or at least one other non-zombie person, Isaac ventures into the Ishimura. Along the way, he uses nodes at stations called benches to upgrade his suit and weapons, buys survival supplies from vending machines, and slices up necromorphs like a guy behind a deli counter cutting salami in one of those machines. In case he gets lost, there's a magic line on the ground that knows where he needs to go and points the way, which is maybe the most important piece of technology in this whole future. Isaac powers on the tram tracks and clears a busted car from the tubes, collecting a stasis module on the way by pulling it off of a severed arm. That's one of the extra rig tools the ship computer mentioned. This time it can zap stuff and freeze it in place, or at least slow it way down. Even though he's just an engineer and has presumably never killed anyone before or been in this type of situation, Isaac takes all this really calmly, tossing the severed arm of another human being aside like it's nothing. He's ready to rock. Returning to tram control, Isaac sends a ride to pick up Hammond and Dallas and bring them to his side of the big partition. Hammond orders Isaac back to the hangar to check on their friend with the broken ankle and try to repair the Kellyan while he searches for more survivors, but fails to find any.
There's no survivors. Daniels is trying to get into the command computer.
Meanwhile, Isaac tells Johnson about the monster situation, but they're interrupted when the ship's singularity core, the engine, starts to overload. At the same time, Necromorphs start breaking into the ship, the classic double whammy. Isaac probably would have been toast as well, except that an explosion throws him free of the ship before it falls from the docks, crashing and exploding below with Johnson inside of it. Isaac finds his other rig module, the kinesis module, attached to, you guessed it, another corpse. This one gives him force powers, but only with particular objects mysteriously placed right near traversal puzzles that need solving. Well, that, and you can use it to throw dismembered limbs back at necromorphs like spears and stick them to the walls, which is half of what makes this game so awesome. Hammond and Daniels are driven off the bridge by more zombies and get separated, while Isaac looks for codes stored in the captain's rig they can use to access the Ishimura's computer files. Taking a pulse rifle from a dying soldier just as they bleed out instead of, I don't know, saying something comforting, Isaac determines that the captain is already dead and heads to the morgue on the medical level. Alright, time for a survival check-in. Let's address the elephant in the room, which in this case is the elephant man in the room, or men as the case may be. There's no easy way to protect yourself from an enemy that needs to be chopped up into little pieces to make it stop chasing you. But a suit of armor is a good start. It's unlikely any of the necromorphs are going to be able to bite through that with their human mouths, although it seems like their stabbers can puncture the rig and deal some damage. Best to avoid. To do so, try a little stealth. Instead of stomping around in your giant boots grunting as you can attract every necromorph in the area, maybe search dead bodies in the normal civilized way. It doesn't change the fact that a naked necromorph carrying a single clip of ammo makes no sense, but at least your feet stay clean. Again, that's more of CEC's problem. Who took all the ammo and medicine on the ship, separated it into little portions, put those portions into boxes, and then scattered the boxes all at random over the hallways? Someone absolutely insane, that's who. Same goes for the stasis module. Now that Isaac's got it, it's his best shot at staying alive, but it has to be recharged from stations dotted around the environment. Instead of charging and moving on, maybe stomp around a little to attract all the nearby baddies, zap them all with your topped up stasis module, and use that method to clear the areas one at a time? Maybe? Plus, Isaac's an engineer. Try popping the front off of that bad boy and seeing if the stasis module recharger stations have batteries inside that you can take with you, or if there's some way to store any more. To the shipbuilders, maybe next time don't make it so that when there's an emergency, the tram controls are on the opposite side of the lockdown wall as the trams themselves. Like, it's okay to quarantine areas off, but maybe keep those two things together. Back to Isaac's advice though. Hey, try using that fancy kinesis module to open doors and stick a crate or some debris through before you explore yourself. That way, any necromorphs poised to pop out become less of a threat. As for how to survive zombies breaking into your ship while the engine overloads, getting blown by a clear, convenient explosion is about the only route to survival possible. That was wild. Next, Isaac finds the morgue barricaded and searches for supplies to use an explosive to clear the path. Meanwhile, Hammond calls to say that he was attacked by the zombie version of Chen, one of their crewmates, and was able to lock him up in an unused escape pod. This might make you wonder why they don't use escape pods, but let's table that for now. As Isaac explores, he triggers old holographic recordings, audio logs, and text messages that reveal a bit of what's happened. When the Ishimura cracked Aegis 7 open, they found what seems to be an alien artifact, a large red stone monolith called the Marker, because there's already a thing called the Monolith. Shortly after that, the miners on the surface started to experience paranoia and hallucinations, and committing suicide by the dozens. As things spiraled out of control on the ground and on the ship, a number of people on board banded together to worship the Marker and celebrate what was happening. They're all members of a church called Unitology, and think that the Marker is divine and will lead to the paradise their religion promises. Some of the science staff, like Dr. Terrence Keane and Nicole, tried to run tests and figure out a solution, but they were overpowered by the Unitologists, including their boss, Dr. Mercer, and the ship's captain, Ben Mathias. After messing with some circuit breakers and a quick zero-G spacewalk, Isaac gets the parts he needs and blows the barricade. Once in the morgue, he finds the captain's body and tries to get his rig codes. But just then, Ben decides to turn into a necromorph right in front of him. Fortunately, Isaac is able to throw a fire extinguisher at him and electrocute it, causing it to explode, because that's totally how fire extinguishers work. After re-killing the captain, Isaac gets a call from Hammond, saying the ship is falling out of orbit since the thrusters are offline. And guess who has to fix them? Isaac wades through an army of dead to reach engineering, running into some more holograms of his girlfriend along the way, and picks up a gun that shoots circular saw blades and sends them bouncing around the room. You know, for construction. They sell them at Home Depot. What? Kendra Daniels calls, revealing that she's still alive in the ship's computer core, and will spend the rest of the game there hacking various doors and files to help Isaac out. She's his man in the van, or damsel in the capsule. He fixes the engines by flying around and physically moving a bunch of machinery into place, then turns a corner and gets grabbed by a giant tentacle coming out of the hole in the wall. While Isaac soldiers on into an area with gross flesh all over the walls and tiny spaces he's got to squeeze through, Daniels sits in the safety of her hacker room and discovers that CEC knew about the Marker and was using the mining operation as a cover. The Marker has been taken aboard the Ishimura and is packaged up in the cargo bay for its return trip. This information barely registers with Isaac because he just picked up a flamethrower. Yes, he's lugging like 400 pounds worth of tools and weapons now, but he feels good, which is good, because believe it or not, there's more space stuff to fix.
Isaac, you did it. The Ishimura's moving again.
No thanks to whoever sabotaged the out of these engines.
Now that the ship is back in orbit, getting slammed by all these asteroids and rocky debris left over from the whole planet cracking thing. Normally, there are ADS cannons that automatically shoot them to little bits, but they're, you guessed it, offline. And guess who has to fix them? It's Hammond. Just kidding, he's busy arguing with Daniels. Isaac has to do it. Isaac always has to do it. He upgrades his security access and heads off to recalibrate the cannons manually. Now, let's pause and go back to that barricade. Hey Isaac, in addition to fighting through hordes of space zombies to collect bomb ingredients from rooms way the hell far away from each other in the middle of a lockdown, do you know another way to clear a barricade? Grabbing pieces of it and moving them aside until it's dismantled. This thing was hastily put together by survivors huddled in fear from anything not nailed down. It can't be that well made. You stomp into everything you run into, so why not try and stomp this and see what shakes loose? If that idea tests your patience, consider the fact that you're carrying a plasma cutter, a tool designed specifically for stuff like this. You need some junk chopped up into easily movable pieces, and you have a gun that chops stuff up. It's not rocket science, dude. Next up, when you're aboard a haunted spaceship where everyone who dies comes back as a monster, and I mean everyone, maybe show a little more caution in the ship's morgue. Literally every corpse you've encountered has either been turning into part of the wall or a necromorph. It can't be that shocking that the room specifically full of dead bodies ends up being a necromorph hotspot. Hammond and Daniels aren't innocent here either. One of you is on the bridge and the other is in the computer core. You couldn't have checked whether the ADS cannons were online before the engine restart? In fact, maybe check all of the ship's systems right now, since you know that it's heavily damaged, and make a little list and then form a plan and an order of priorities from there. That's much better than sending poor Isaac backtracking through the ship over and over again to try and patch up systems faster than they can fall apart. Isaac finally enters a room with a person in it that isn't separated into two parts by a glass wall. It's Hammond, who sadly ejects Zombie Chen's locked escape pod into space before handing over an executive keycard, which will let Isaac get to where he needs to go, including the fancy executive bathrooms. Or does Isaac go in his suit? We'll never know. In the atrium, Isaac encounters the biggest necromorph yet, a hulking pile of flesh that moves like a gorilla. It's like someone told Christian Bale to gain weight for a role and forgot to tell him to stop. He also starts to see baby necromorphs, which is to say dead zombified babies with 3 scorpion tails each. In fact, Isaac cuts up so many zombie babies, it kinda makes you wonder how many babies the Ishimura had on board. Was there a full-on preschool up in here or what? Kendra Daniels, still hacking away at the ship's systems, calls to say that she accessed some medical reports and concluded that the fleshy goo on the walls is slowly changing the environment, and that the marker released a zombie-like infection that spread through the miner population and the Ishimura crew. Thanks, Kendra, Isaac thinks. Kind of already figured out that part. Then he blasts back out into the space outside the ship to get away from any more obvious exposition. Once he's free and floating, Isaac links his own gun to the ADS cannons and plays a little game of asteroids, while repeatedly stopping to top off his oxygen tank from yet another set of handy dispensers scattered around the ship. The cannons eventually start to work on their own again, not to mention Daniels discovers a recent transmission from the medical bay that appears to show Nicole still alive. Isaac plans to go straight there, while Hammond looks for more survivors on the crew deck, and Daniels keeps hacking. Medical turns out to be easy to access thanks to the working tram system. But Isaac immediately gets locked in by Dr. Mercer, the crazy leader of the onboard unitologists. He freezes Isaac with his own stasis module and reveals that the message from Nicole was just a recorded hologram. Like any good villain, he then tells Isaac his whole plan, which is to help the Maker cause something called the Convergence, both here and then by taking it back to Earth. He leaves Isaac alone with an unkillable monster called a Necromorph Hunter, forcing him to haul ass down the first corridor Daniels can unlock. Next, in the never-ending chain of stuff on the Ishimura breaking comes the hydraulics bay, which threatens to poison the air on board. Isaac has to stumble through rooms full of poisonous gas to recover some liquid nitrogen, so he can mix an enzyme that will revitalize the plants, which would be fine if the Hunter Necromorph wasn't constantly trying to slide into his DMs. To make matters worse, Isaac gets a call from head botanist Dr. Cross, who says that the enzyme will only weaken the Leviathan, not remove it. Oh, did I not mention the Leviathan? It's a necromorph the size of Pensacola that's lodged in food storage, pumping toxins out through the mouths of human victims called Weezers. Say it ain't so, whoa, whoa. After getting some more weird transmissions from Nicole and Daniel's little brother Kieran, Isaac gets his head together for another zero-G boss fight with the Leviathan and its flailing tentacles. Fortunately, even alien zombies follow the rule, shoot at the glowing parts, and he's able to vanquish the beast and send it sliding off the Ishimura into the void. Wait, hold up. What was that crap with Chen, Hammond? You're basically in the Aliens video game, and you've just got the xenomorph trapped, and you just randomly eject it while he's still alive? How can Isaac carry this whole team if the weak links keep dropping the ball? I wonder if the one necromorph we've taken the time to give a face and name will potentially come back into play at some point. Isaac has just been dismembering these things for days. Maybe have him put the man out of his misery before you bury him in space. Speaking of things buried in space, somewhere in here is where Isaac picks up a new weapon, the Force Gun. whose main fire mode is to do like a Jedi push. This raises a very nerdy question. If the scientists of the future can fully control the way Force moves through space, why is there only gravity control in a few rooms on the ship? If anti-gravity isn't a technology you can currently afford to deploy everywhere, start working on that now and assign it to your best people, because it would raise Isaac's chances of survival quite a bit if he didn't have to rely entirely on jet boots, magnets, and an oxygen tank that can apparently only hold less than a minute of air at a time. Seriously, a major safety issue. Here now in 2024, we don't have planet-cracking spaceships, but we definitely have scuba tanks and oxygen tanks that last for about 45 minutes. I get that Isaac doesn't want much extra weight on what already looks like a heavy suit, but if you use future technology to design a suit capable of spacewalking, maybe find a way to store more than a few fistfuls of oxygen inside of it. But I digress. What I really want to talk about is that the Force Gun has a secondary mode of fire, like all of Isaac's weapons, only this one breaks the laws of physics in a way that seems like it should quite frankly overshadow the main plot. The Force Gun's alt-fire creates black holes, miniature singularities that suck everything inside, even bending the light around it. At this point, we've totally abandoned the idea that Isaac's weapons are originally power tools. The plasma cutter, sure. The saw blade ripper one, yeah, always. ABC. Always be circular sawing baby space zombies. But using a weapon that can spawn black holes of any size just feels dangerous as messing with an alien artifact. Like, there was literally news about how when they started the Large Hadron Collider particle accelerator, some scientists thought it might create a miniature black hole. And just that one would destroy the whole world. Not to mention escape velocity. You think you're in hell now, Isaac? Maybe stick to the flamethrower before you open a literal portal to the underworld. Honestly, there is so much to talk about in this section. For example, CEC. You already invented a Force Gun. Just make really big versions of those bad boys and mount them on the ship's hull facing outward into space. And boom. Anti-asteroid force field. Way safer than cannons that blast each fragment into multiple smaller fragments, most of which have to be blasted again and again. Like all survival horror, this is a universe of severely limited ammo, and you're wasting it. Also, the ship's job is to crack planets in half. You need a better solution for rocky space debris anyway. Breaking a planet open and not expecting to have to deal with a bunch of flying rocks is like eating spaghetti and marinara in a white sweater. Thrilling, but ultimately a very stupid move. As for the best survival strategies for Isaac versus a Necromorph Hulk or Leviathan, or the literally unkillable Hunter, I'd just get naked, wiggle into one of those fleshy walls, and pretend to be one of the Necromorphs that's stuck to the environment. Seriously, when something is literally described as unkillable, my how to beat hands are kinda tied. Isaac's tactic of flee and escape is the only move here. At least until Dr. Cross tells Isaac that her man Jacob was building an SOS beacon on the mining deck that never got deployed. After scavenging some more rig codes, he gets a call from Hammond saying that all the unitologists are gathering in the crew deck and are clearly up to something. Just then, some kind of psychic wave sweeps through and makes Isaac and Daniels both experience great pain, which means the marker's starting to wake up. Isaac finally runs into Nicole, for real this time, not a hologram, and she tells him that she can unlock the place where the SOS beacon is stored. Isaac's like, "It's been 6 months and I thought you were dead. Should we maybe talk more?" But I guess time is of the essence or whatever. Isaac's able to secure the beacon, strap it to the big chunk of the planet the Ishimura was in the middle of mining when it got disabled, and release the payload. He also uses the ADS cannons to shoot the Leviathan off of the ship again, for real this time, and extends a comms antenna, you guessed it, manually, to navigate to all of these places. He's forced to dodge giant crushing machinery, perfectly timed to walk by walls of flames as they turn off and on, and telekinetically float a bunch of car batteries into their sockets. They finally make contact with a military ship, the Valor. But before they can talk much, the Valor recovers the escape pod Chen was in, like you would, and he turns or slaughters everyone on the ship. It flies out of control, because there's no spaceship in the Dead Space universe that doesn't lose control and crash into the Ishimura. Hammond calls Isaac to say that he found a working executive shuttlecraft, But with no singularity core, Isaac decides to remove the singularity core from the crashed Valor and take it to the shuttle, briefly stopping to launch a nuke away from them and save everyone's asses again, no big deal. Right as he's taking the core, Isaac watches Hammond get killed by the Chen monster, which he had been hallucinating as normal Chen. At least he takes the Necromorph with him when he jumps them both into the core. Just before leaping from the Valor as it breaks up, Isaac uncovers logs that prove they were not there because of the SOS, but to nuke the whole area and cover up the tragedy. Yeah, so we just started covering games here, so I'm just going to lean into this once. Maybe don't build your spaceship with huge sheets of fire blocking walkways, guys. Let's knock it off with the giant blocks that have to be telekinetically floated into place to turn the lights on. Are there no building codes in the future? Something Isaac definitely neglects through this section is trying to control the ventilation systems. Considering he's accessing almost every other system on the ship, it doesn't seem like it would have been too tough for his engineer ass to figure out how to shut off the gas globally, or at least in one section. He even messes with the pipes when he's fixing the toxic air. Secondly, and this one feels kind of obvious, but when you've just fought monsters for 6 hours and see your girlfriend, the person you specifically came here to save, and she's somehow miraculously alive, you should definitely stop and try and talk to her for like at least a little bit. And if she says something creepy like, "You will make us whole again," take a moment to unpack that. It's really nice that it happened to work out that the exposed singularity core was really a heroic and poetic way for Hammond to go out and take Chen with him. But you have to put a guardrail around stuff like that. This is what you get from the people who make a black hole gun. Exposed singularities everywhere. Okay, Isaac, we're 2/3 of the way through this video. Let's apply everything about survival that we've learned so far to your next decision, okay? Next, the whole path to the crew deck, right where the executive shuttle, the unitologists, and the marker all are, opens up mysteriously. There's just like an open corridor between Isaac and where he needs to go, and he doesn't find that suspicious. He goes jet booting down that bad boy. Also, a really important plot point. This is when Isaac takes some time as he passes through the gym to play 0G basketball to unlock a reward locker of items and upgrades. He literally just watched a friend die and triggered a nuclear explosion in space, but now he's stopping to shoot hoops. What a stone cold badass. Of course, if he hadn't done that, maybe he would have arrived at his destination in time to save Jacob, the guy who built the SOS, from being stasis executed by Dr. Mercer. This seems to be too much for poor Isaac. Or maybe it's just the marker, but he starts to hear more voices and laughter through the radio. Isaac runs into Dr. Kine, who eventually convinces him that rather than just escaping on the executive shuttle, they have a chance to end this all here and save humanity by returning the marker to the center of the Aegis 7. Kine distracts Dr. Mercer so that Isaac can move the marker and the singularity core to the shuttle and hook everything up. The Necromorph hunter attacks Isaac a final time, but it turns out unkillable was an overstatement after all, when Isaac incinerates the sucker in the shuttle's repaired engines. Unfortunately, just as Isaac seems ready to roll, some giant tentacles burst in and one drags the marker down along with Mercer, who's understandably feeling a little bit betrayed. Another tentacle goes for Isaac and pulls him away, but he's able to get it to relinquish its grasp with a very clever move called shoot at it desperately for one more moment of precious life. Oh my god, here it comes. Before we move on, in case it still needs to be said, if all of the doors in the hallway of a haunted house close and an ethereal light illuminates a straight path into the darkness, turn and go any other way. It's a trap, my dude. And I know I've talked a lot about the importance of staying as calm and collected as it's possible to be in different high-stress situations. But as someone who's just killed a double-wide RV-sized zombie using space cannons, I don't know if basketball is the best use of Isaac's time here. I'm not saying don't have fun with what you do, but there's been a pretty consistent urgency and time factor, and sort of a ticking clock to things so far. It feels pretty important that he stick to his schedule. Don't blame your girlfriend if a loved one kills themselves sounds more like personal advice than survival advice. But in this case, it turned out to be both. I do think it drives home the importance of regular, open, and vulnerable communication with those you trust. It's not just mentally healthy, it means if your partner dies alone in space, you won't have any regrets. Well, maybe one. But at least you could move on without needing to kill an army of the undead. Although in Isaac's case, I guess it worked out since Nicole's alive, or is she? At any rate, if you do become aware that you're having active hallucinations like hearing voices, weird laughter over your radio, or seeing your memories play out on broken TV screens, the best thing to do is get yourself to a mental health professional. But if you're stuck in space fighting monsters, the next best things for short-term symptom relief include talking back to the voices, which may help you regain a feeling of control over them. The point is, if Isaac used some coping mechanisms here, there's a chance he'd be better equipped to handle the increasing influence of the marker's effect. As for dealing with tentacles, the best real-world equivalent I could think of was how to escape from the grip of a giant octopus, which is a procedure I'm sure we all know. Stay stiff, peel the suckers from your body, and turn somersaults in the water. It should be pretty easy for Isaac to stiffen up in the rig, and we'll let him take a bye on peeling the suckers away manually, which it looks like might not be practical in this situation, but he's a zero-G master with jet boots, so he should nail the somersault thing. As an engineer, you'd expect him to know this stuff. Forget laying back and shooting down at its glowing joints. Isaac should have been doing as many flips as possible to maintain range of motion. Although Isaac does escape the tentacle, it turns out it yanked open a big hole in the ship when it took the marker away. At this point, the thing's at rest in a cargo bay, so he sends Kine to take the repaired shuttle to the hangar while he retrieves the missing ancient artifact. He uses giant cargo loaders to wrench the marker out and send it on its way. The ship's automatic loader of giant things is busted, so Isaac has to turn off gravity in the hangar so he can do it. You guessed it, manually. Just when he turns gravity back on, Kynes gets shot at long range by the other character still alive, Kendra Daniels. As she flies the hell out of there, ditching Isaac on the Ishimura, she does like all good villains and explains her whole plan. She was sent by EarthGov to cover all this up, and Valor had come at the request to help with that. The truth is, the very first marker was a smaller version discovered on Earth, and determined to be of true extraterrestrial origin. The government, and this was hundreds of years ago, decided to build a huge one and activate it on Aegis 7 as a test. It's unknown exactly what happened after that, but it wasn't awesome, because they buried the artifact at the center of the planet and made it illegal to mine there. Nicole calls Isaac from flight control and says she knows how they can escape, but yet she doesn't tell Isaac what that is until he physically gets to her, which seems weird, because even after she reveals that she can remote control the executive shuttle and force it to return, she's still saying weird crap like, "make us whole again," and she can't escape fate, but who can? This thing that is definitely Isaac's girlfriend Nicole tells him to get back in the shuttle where she programs a flight path. They successfully land the shuttle on the planet and unload the marker, which they now have to return to a pedestal that will lower it into its final resting place. Isaac's worried about the effects of the marker, which are getting stronger and stronger, but Nicole says he'll be protected from that when he's near it like an eye in a storm, or a dead space, if you will. Okay, hey, cutting in again. And this is more of an idea pitch than a survival tip I can back up. But consider the fact that the marker needs to get buried at the center of Aegis 7, and also that the ship it's on, the Ishimura, is currently carrying a huge payload of planet chunk. Or at least it was before Isaac launched it to get the SOS out into space. So at one point, they had control of the asteroid and the ship's engines because Isaac fixed them. So why not flip the ship so the asteroid is facing up and crash the whole thing into the planet? You don't need to manually load it onto the shuttle and hand deliver it like an evil pizza. Also, a survival tip for humanity itself. If you ever find an alien artifact, there are more responsible ways to test them by immediately building a giant one. It's good that you tested it on a remote planet, but why make it huge? Scientifically speaking, maybe start with a medium-sized one, or hell, here's a wild idea. Maybe run some tests on the actual alien artifact you found before reverse engineering a giant one and running tests on that. Then when it causes some kind of horrible disaster, burying it and slapping on a warning sign probably isn't going to keep evil trapped for long. What you should probably have done is send a team of specialists hundreds of years ago when this happened, instead of relying on your children's children to actually turn the marker off or resolve whatever is going on with it. Furthermore, by this point, even though I know he's been under a lot of stress, Isaac needs to be keying into some of Nicole's strange behavior. She's exhibiting flat affect, repeating a mantra word for word, seems detached from reality, and is saying grandiose and fatalistic things. Everything in the future is weirdly designed to force people to split up their group. Why does Nicole have to stay behind to program the shuttle's flight path? You're telling me you can't really program a flight path from within the ship? Or is that yet another thing that's out of order? Because I'm telling you, Isaac can fix that. He'll disconnect a gravity tether or ignite a centrifuge, and you'll be in Flight Path City. But no, instead, you're yet again separating from the woman you came here to save on an exploding ship you know for a fact is swarming with corpse monsters. Think this through, friend. Back in the present, as he moves the marker down a series of conveyors, Isaac stops to repair one more powerful conduit for old time's sake, and runs a final gamut of killing necromorphs in a wide variety of satisfying ways. Once the marker's back on the pedestal, it starts to fire a laser up into the sky like the Luxor. Nicole reconnects with him just as the Ishimura finally fails, for real this time, and starts dropping asteroid fragments, planet parts, and ship debris down onto the surface. Isaac runs inside to mess with some gravity tethers to deflect them, leaving Nicole behind by herself for a third time for no reason. Left wide open and unarmed, Nicole gets Daniels' gun put to her head when the turncoat reappears just like Chen did, to snap Isaac out of his delusions. Kendra shows him the rest of Nicole's recorded apology message from the beginning of the game. It first seemed like an apology for the fight, but in fact it was Nicole's suicide note. As things spiraled out of control on the ship, she made the decision to inject herself with poison rather than turn into a necromorph. At this point, Isaac can see that the person he's been seeing as Nicole has actually been Dr. Cross this whole time. And she's also been seeing him as her partner Jacob. That was the marker's way of influencing them both to work together to return it to its home. She kills Cross, reloads the marker, and prepares to steal the shuttle, expecting Isaac to be buried along with everything else when the sky falls down. He ends up running towards the shuttle just as she starts to board it, when the biggest alien tentacle of them all crushes her and drags her off to her death. And although this tentacle at first seems like a friend, it quickly turns foe when Isaac realizes it's connected to the hive mind, a big flailing mass of necrotic flesh at the heart of Aegis 7 that all the other necromorphs are linked with. Isaac dodges flesh bombs, more enemy dudes, and tentacles aplenty until he finally pours enough pain into the hive mind to trigger its death animation. Once that's done, he gets back on the shuttle and takes off, now the lone survivor of what will surely come to be known as the curious case of 1,000 dead bodies with stomp marks on them. Alone in the safety of the first ship to ever fly away from the Ishimura and not crash back into it, he removes his signature helmet and airs out his body. He gives Nicole's apology message another watch, but again is interrupted, this time by Nicole's voice over his shoulder. Did she survive her gunshot wounds and crawl onto the shuttlecraft? Nah, she's a zombie. Or, arguably, a zombie that lives inside Isaac's brain. And now we've reached the end. What would you do? Or what have you done if you've played Dead Space Remake? Did it go something a little like what we discussed here? Same or different? Let us know down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe, and check out the How to Be playlist for more videos exactly like this one. I'm the Guy, I'll see you in the next video, and have a damn good day.